I walked into the grand ballroom, my heels clicking softly against the marble floor, feeling like an intruder in a world that wasn't mine. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above, casting prisms of light on tables laden with champagne flutes and golden cutlery. Socialites laughed, their designer gowns and perfectly tailored suits whispering power and privilege. I had spent years beside this man, supporting his ambitions, attending events I barely understood. Yet tonight, I felt invisible. Then he said it, loud enough for the cluster of guests nearby to hear. "You don't belong here." A shiver ran down my spine as the murmurs started, polite but pointed, slicing through me like ice. My face flushed with a mix of embarrassment and fury, every whispered comment echoing in my ears. I couldn't grasp why he wanted to humiliate me here, now, in front of everyone who mattered. Yet beneath the humiliation, a spark ignited, a resolve that something had to change. I straightened my shoulders, forcing a smile, masking the anger coiling inside. But I swore to myself this night would not define me. I remember the early days of our marriage, the excitement and promises of building a life together. I poured myself into his dreams, cheering him on at every board meeting, every networking event, every late-night strategy session, while my own ambitions quietly faded into the background. I gave up promotions, opportunities, and even the simplest pleasures because I believed in us, in the life we were supposed to share. I handled the household, the social calendars, and even his moods with a patience I didn't always feel, finding small victories in seeing him succeed, thinking that love meant sacrifice. There were moments he held me close after a long day, whispered gratitude in my ear, and I felt like I mattered. Those flashes of warmth made the sacrifices feel worthwhile. But over time, the pattern shifted. The kindness became expected, the victories invisible, and his compliments rare. That same man, whom I had trusted with everything, stood before me tonight, publicly dismissing me, erasing years of devotion with a single sentence. The contrast between those moments of intimacy and today's betrayal left a hollow ache in my chest, a loneliness I could no longer ignore. Every whisper and glance at the gala reminded me of how unnoticed I had become, and the frustration bubbling inside me felt like fire against ice. It was in this quiet fury that my resolve began to take shape. It started as a simple favor. I was helping sort through some old company accounts, mostly to keep the paperwork organized, nothing more. But as I sifted through spreadsheets, invoices, and bank statements, a pattern emerged that made my stomach twist. Figures didn't add up. Transfers had been made without explanation, shares had been quietly reallocated, and legal documents were signed with my husband's name in a way that should have been impossible. My heart pounded as I realized the truth. He had taken control of my family's company, the business that had supported us both, behind my back. Shock numbed me for a moment, disbelief clawing at every thought. How could he betray me like this? The betrayal cut deeper than the humiliation at the gala, because this time, it wasn't just social. It was financial, personal, and strategic. Rage simmered beneath the surface, but I knew I couldn't confront him directly. It would play right into his hands. Instead, I began thinking in measured steps, planning quietly, cataloging every document, every loophole, every ally who might stand with me. I realized that the only way to reclaim what was mine and to ensure he faced the consequences was to outsmart him, to turn his own arrogance against him. For the first time in years, a cold clarity settled in my mind. I would win, and he wouldn't even see it coming. I spent countless nights hunched over my laptop, reading legal documents and case precedents, learning every loophole, every clause, every tiny oversight my husband had left unguarded. It became an obsession, a mental chess game where each move had to be calculated and precise. I reached out quietly to employees who had always been loyal, those who had quietly admired my dedication and competence, and found allies in unexpected places. Assistants, managers, even a few board members who had grown frustrated with his arrogance. I began reconnecting with influential contacts in my network, the kind of people who understood business and power and could help me maneuver in ways he would never anticipate. Every phone call, every email, every discreet meeting strengthened my resolve, and with each new piece of knowledge, my confidence grew. Internally, I replayed scenarios, imagining his surprise when his schemes unraveled, but I kept the facade of compliance in public. I smiled politely, laughed when necessary, nodded in agreement, all while secretly mapping the downfall of the man who had humiliated and betrayed me. Even as I played the submissive wife at social gatherings and business dinners, tiny seeds of revenge took root in my mind, subtle, careful, unstoppable. By the time anyone realized what was happening, I would already be several moves ahead, and the taste of triumph was beginning to feel almost tangible. It was a routine company meeting, one I had attended countless times without anyone noticing me beyond a nod or polite smile. But today, I saw an opportunity. When a disagreement arose over a minor financial report, I spoke up, calmly pointing out a discrepancy that no one else had caught. The room fell silent. My husband's eyes narrowed, a flicker of surprise and maybe irritation passing over his face. He tried to brush it off, waving my comment away as insignificant, but I didn't let him derail me. I elaborated with precise details, referencing documents he hadn't thought to double-check. Slowly, heads turned, employees leaning in, whispers of approval barely restrained. For the first time, they saw me not as the quiet, compliant wife, but as someone with knowledge, insight, and authority. My husband's dismissal only made it sweeter. He underestimated me as he always had. This subtle assertion of competence planted the first seed of doubt in his mind, a small foreshadowing that the woman he had humiliated could, in fact, outmaneuver him. And though the room returned to the meeting's agenda, I felt the thrill of quiet victory coursing through me, a private triumph that only I fully understood. Late at night, when the house was quiet and the city lights flickered against the windows, I found myself staring at the ceiling, replaying the day's events over and over. Anger pulsed through me, but beneath it was a raw, aching sadness that I hadn't allowed myself to feel before. Betrayal wasn't just a word. It was the sting of being dismissed, underestimated, and replaced in the very world I had helped build. I called my closest confidant, someone who had witnessed my sacrifices and understood my struggle, and we spoke in whispers over the phone. She reminded me that my worth wasn't defined by his arrogance, yet hearing it out loud made me confront the truth I had buried. I had been complicit in my own invisibility, too polite, too patient, too willing to fade into the background. I wrestled with moral dilemmas. How far could I go to reclaim what was mine without becoming like him? Could I expose his misdeeds publicly or quietly manipulate events to my advantage? The contrast between the gilded world he flaunted and the determination growing within me felt electric. Rich, powerful, untouchable to everyone else, he had overlooked the one person who could quietly dismantle his carefully constructed empire. In that silence, I realized my anger was more than justified. It was fuel, and with it, I began to shape a plan that would not only restore what was stolen, but redefine my own strength in ways he could never anticipate. Over the next few months, I moved quietly but deliberately, weaving myself into the company's inner workings with a finesse my husband had never anticipated. I scheduled one-on-one meetings with key stakeholders, listening more than I spoke, but when I did, my words carried precision and authority. I impressed clients with thoughtful solutions and careful attention to detail, earning their trust without drawing suspicion. Board members began to notice the shift, commenting discreetly on my insights and strategic thinking, while my husband continued to flaunt his dominance, oblivious to the subtle undermining of his control. I orchestrated small maneuvers, nudging conversations toward opportunities he had overlooked, highlighting inefficiencies he dismissed, and planting ideas that seemed to originate from the team rather than me. Every interaction was dialogue-heavy, a chess match of wit and patience, designed to fortify alliances and destabilize his confidence without exposing my hand. The tension grew as he sensed something had changed, yet he couldn't identify the source. He frowned more often, questioned decisions he once dictated without challenge, and the employees who had once cowered now exchanged glances of quiet recognition. Each success, each whispered compliment from those who mattered, fueled my determination. I was no longer the sidelined wife. I was the strategist, invisible yet unstoppable, and the stage for the first real confrontation was being meticulously set. When the invitation arrived for his next luxury gala, I felt a thrill I hadn't expected. This wasn't just another night of whispered humiliation and sparkling chandeliers. It was the perfect stage. I began preparing in secret, every detail carefully orchestrated. I collected evidence of his misappropriation, cataloging financial records, emails, and contracts that would leave no room for denial. Media contacts I had quietly nurtured over months were briefed, positioned to capture the revelation without tipping him off. I studied the guest list, anticipating allies, skeptics, and witnesses whose presence could amplify the impact. In my mind, I ran through every scenario, imagining his surprise, his disbelief, the moment his carefully curated persona began to crumble. I maintained my public facade, smiling, agreeing, laughing when necessary, while beneath the surface, a storm of calculated strategy and righteous anger raged. The suspense built with each passing day, every conversation, every glance exchanged in meetings, all leading toward that single night where the balance of power would shift. I felt the intoxicating mix of fear and excitement, knowing the payoff was near, and for the first time in years, I felt completely in control of the outcome. The night of the gala arrived, and the ballroom shimmered with crystal chandeliers and whispered anticipation, completely unaware that everything was about to shift. I walked in, composed, every step deliberate, my smile measured but unwavering. As the evening unfolded, I waited for the precise moment, when attention was focused on him, the man who had humiliated and betrayed me. Casually, I began presenting a series of reports and documents, framing them as part of a routine financial review. Yet each page revealed the truth: the unauthorized transfers, the manipulated contracts, the evidence of stolen control. Gasps rippled through the crowd as clients, investors, and even media personnel began to comprehend the scope of his deception. He froze at first, trying to laugh it off, insisting there must be a mistake, but his confidence crumbled as murmurs of disbelief grew louder. I remained calm, measured, exuding a quiet authority that contrasted sharply with his mounting panic. He attempted excuses, but each word faltered, each explanation refuted by the meticulous evidence laid out before everyone. Whispers turned into pointed questions. Eyes that had admired him now scrutinized him with suspicion and judgment. By the time the realization fully sank in, the man who had prided himself on control and power stood exposed, humiliated in the very space where he had once flaunted his dominance. The first major reversal of power had occurred, subtle yet catastrophic, leaving the audience suspended in awe of the turn, eager for the next act of retribution. The weeks following the gala were a whirlwind of formalities, signatures, and court confirmations. But through it all, I moved with calm precision. The company that had once been stolen from my family was now under my official control, every legal document affirming what I had worked for in secret. I presented myself at board meetings and client gatherings with a professional grace that left no room for question. Every gesture, every word measured, deliberate, and confident. My husband tried desperately to salvage his reputation, offering excuses, pleading for understanding, even attempting subtle gestures of reconciliation, but I remained unshaken. He had underestimated me for too long. Now all his efforts were irrelevant. Employees, clients, and stakeholders watched as I assumed authority, their respect unmistakable, while he shrank in comparison, powerless and exposed. The sense of karmic justice was palpable. Years of betrayal, arrogance, and dismissal had finally met their match. I felt the quiet satisfaction of victory, tempered by the recognition that power had been reclaimed not through anger, but through careful, patient strategy. In that moment, I was not only vindicated but untouchable, and he, once the dominant figure, was left watching from the shadows, a reminder that underestimating someone who had been quietly observing could be the gravest mistake of all. Alone in my office, the hum of the city outside felt like applause, subtle but undeniable. I sank into my chair, letting the weight of the past months wash over me, the betrayal, the humiliation, the long nights of planning, the careful moves that had finally brought everything into alignment. Memories of laughter replaced by whispers, small victories unnoticed. All those times I had questioned myself and my worth, they no longer held power over me. I allowed myself a quiet smile, the first real one in years, born from a sense of accomplishment and self-respect. When my closest allies joined me, offering congratulations and sharing in the relief of justice served, I felt a deep validation that went beyond material victory. Conversations flowed effortlessly, peppered with laughter, reflections, and recognition of how far I had come. Family members who had doubted or dismissed me before now regarded me with a mix of admiration and quiet awe. Each interaction reinforced not only my triumph, but my transformation. The woman who had been underestimated, humiliated, and erased had emerged stronger, wiser, and fully in control of her life. For the first time, I felt whole, empowered, and undeniably proud of the path I had carved, knowing I had earned every ounce of respect and authority that now surrounded me. The night of my gala arrived, this time under my own name and vision, every detail reflecting the company's revival and the power I now wielded. Crystal lights sparkled across the ballroom, laughter and music filling the air. But unlike the humiliation I had endured before, this celebration was mine, a testament to strategy, patience, and resilience. Friends and loyal employees approached me with genuine admiration, praising not only the company's success, but the poise and strength I had shown throughout the ordeal. I smiled, letting their words settle into me, feeling the weight of every struggle transform into quiet triumph. As I moved among the guests, sipping champagne and exchanging warm congratulations, my mind wandered back over the journey, the years of compromise, the betrayal, the calculated maneuvers, and finally, the reclamation of everything that had been stolen. I realized that the true victory was not just legal or financial, but personal. I was stronger, wiser, and fully in control of my life. The echoes of the past no longer haunted me. Instead, they reminded me of how far I had come. In that moment, standing tall amid laughter and admiration, I felt complete, satisfied, and finally free, leaving a lingering sense of catharsis that would stay with anyone who had followed my journey. Witnessing a woman rise from betrayal to undeniable empowerment,